Ambassador Tejo walked through the long hallway that led to the council chamber. His black diplomatic uniform felt heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, Commander Ji Woo and Dr. So Young followed in silence. Their footsteps echoed off the dark, walls made of some alien metal that seemed to absorb light. The hallway was designed to make visitors feel small. It stretched for almost a kilometer, with a ceiling so high that Tejo could barely see the top. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, reminding everyone that this was not a human place. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, where 17 different alien species made decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Tejo had made this walk 12 times before. Each time, he had come to ask for fair treatment, for humanity. Each time, he had been refused. Today would be different. Today he was not coming to ask for anything. The massive doors to the council chamber opened with a sound like thunder. Inside, the chamber was shaped like a giant bowl, with seats arranged in circles that went up and up until they disappeared into shadows. Each section held a different alien species, and each species looked down at the small platform in the center, where human ambassadors were expected to stand. Tejo walked to the center platform. He did not bow. He did not show any sign of respect. He simply stood there and waited. The first to speak was Counselor Vextara of the Valen hierarchy. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors as she moved. When she was angry, she glowed red. When she was amused, she sparkled with blue light. Right now, she was definitely amused. "The humans return again," she said, her voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "Have you come to beg for mercy once more? Perhaps you have finally learned your place in the galaxy." Tejo looked up at her without expression. "No," he said simply. "We have come to give you a choice." The chamber filled with sounds that might have been laughter if they had come from human throats. The Korthan delegates made deep rumbling noises that shook the floor. The gas-like Nethri created swirling patterns in their containment fields that pulsed with what looked like humor. Even the normally silent Zephyrians made soft musical tones that somehow conveyed mockery. High Counselor Rathmek of the Korthan Empire stood up. He was 3 meters tall and covered in thick armor that seemed to be part of his skin. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "A choice?" he said. "What choice could a species that barely learned to travel between stars possibly offer us? You have been in space for less than 200 of your years. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Dr. So Young stepped forward. She was small compared to Tejo, and tiny compared to the aliens looking down at them. But her voice was clear and steady. "For 3 years you have restricted our trade routes," she said. "You have blocked us from settling on worlds that no one else wants. You have treated us like children who cannot be trusted with dangerous toys. This ends now." The Nethri delegate spoke next. Its voice came from speakers built into its containment field, since it was made of gas and had no solid mouth. "Your species is violent and unpredictable. You fight wars over resources that could be shared. You damage planets for short-term gain. The restrictions are for the good of the galaxy." Commander Jiwoo had been quiet until now. She was a military officer, and she understood the language of power better than diplomats did. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate who had eyes to meet. "You call us violent," she said. "You say we are unpredictable. You say we are dangerous. You are right about all of these things. That is why you should listen very carefully to what we say next." The chamber became quiet. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to fade away. Tejo reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like nothing more than a communication tablet, the kind that diplomats used to take notes. He held it up so everyone could see it. "This device is connected to every human settlement, every human ship, and every human research station in the galaxy," he said. "There are more of these than you know, many more. For 2 years you have allowed our scientists to build research stations in your territory. You thought they were studying stars and planets. They were studying you." Vextara's crystal body shifted from blue to yellow, which meant confusion among her people. "Studying us? For what purpose?" Dr. So Young smiled, but it was not a pleasant Smile. To learn how to hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. To find your weaknesses. To discover what you fear most. We have learned much. The Zephyrian delegate finally spoke. The Zephyrians were telepathic, and their representative was a tall, thin being with large eyes that seemed to see into people's souls. When it spoke, its words appeared in everyone's mind rather than being heard. This is impossible. We would have detected any research into weapons or military technology. Our sensors monitor all activities in council space. Yes, said Tejo. You monitor military technology. You watch for weapons. You look for signs of aggression. But you do not watch for scientists who appear to be studying harmless things. You do not suspect researchers who smile and ask polite questions about your biology, your culture, your history. Commander Jiwoo took another step forward. While you were watching our military ships and counting our weapons, our real work was being done by people you never suspected. Doctors who learned how your bodies work. Historians who studied your wars. Psychologists who discovered what keeps you awake at night. The chamber was completely silent now. Some of the delegates were leaning forward in their seats. Others were leaning back, as if they could somehow distance themselves from the humans on the platform below. Rathmek's armor plates shifted and clicked, a sign of agitation among his people. Even if this is true, what could you possibly do with such information? There are 17 species in this council. There are trillions of us across thousands of worlds. There are only 8 billion humans on a few dozen planets. Tejo looked down at the device in his hands. Numbers do not matter when you understand the right pressure points. A small virus can kill a giant if it attacks the right systems. A single loose bolt can bring down a massive machine if it is the right bolt. Dr. So-Young checked her own device, a small instrument disguised as a medical scanner. All across the galaxy, hidden systems were coming online. Sleeper programs that had waited patiently for months were beginning to activate. Research stations that appeared to be studying cosmic radiation were powering up equipment designed for very different purposes. We give you 30 solar rotations, said Tejo. Remove all trade restrictions on human settlements. Allow us to colonize any uninhabited worlds we choose. Grant us full membership in the Galactic Council with equal voting rights. Do these things, and we will continue to be the friendly, harmless species you think we are. Vextara's crystal body flashed bright red. And if we refuse? Tejo put the device back in his jacket. He turned and began walking toward the exit, followed by Jiwoo and So-Young. When he reached the edge of the platform, he stopped and looked back. Then you will learn why evolution made humans the way we are, he said. You will discover why a species that fights itself constantly is still more dangerous than species that have been at peace for 10,000 years. You will understand why the galaxy should fear us. The three humans walked out of the chamber. Behind them, the council delegates sat in shocked silence for several minutes before the shouting began. In her hidden pocket, Dr. So-Young's finger hovered over a small button. When pressed, it would send a signal to every human research station in the galaxy. The signal would begin the process that would show the council exactly what humans were capable of when they stopped pretending to be harmless. She did not press the button yet. There were still 30 solar rotations left, but the countdown had begun, and across the galaxy, humans who had been pretending to be simple researchers and peaceful colonists began preparing for war in ways the council could not imagine. Tariq. Galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous humans were not the ones who looked like soldiers. They were the ones who looked like friends. Admiral Kyungmin stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride and watched the Korthan warships move into position. There were 20 of them, each one twice the size of his flagship. Their hulls were covered in thick armor that could stop most weapons, and their guns were powerful enough to crack planets. The Korthan fleet was moving to block the shipping lanes that connected human colonies to the rest of the galaxy. It was exactly what the human command had expected them to do. The Korthans always used overwhelming force when they wanted to make a point. "Admiral," said Captain He-Jin over the communication system, "my ships are in position. The Korthans think we are just cargo freighters running scared." Kyungmin smiled. "Good. Let them keep thinking that for a few more minutes. 3 months ago, when the Council had first started talking about a military response to human demands, Admiral Kyungmin had begun preparing for this moment. He had sent cargo ships filled with supplies to human colonies throughout the galaxy. The ships looked old and slow and harmless. Their hulls were painted with the bright colors that most species used for civilian vessels. Their identification signals marked them as carrying food, medicine, and equipment for farming. The Korthans had scanned these ships many times. Their sensors showed exactly what they expected to see. Cargo holds full of grain and medical supplies, crews of farmers and doctors and engineers, simple people trying to make a living on frontier worlds. What the Korthan sensors did not see were the holographic projectors that made weapons look like farming equipment. They did not detect the military-grade engines hidden behind false walls. They did not notice that some of the doctors and farmers were actually trained fighter pilots and weapons specialists. "Sir," said his communications officer, "the Korthan commander is demanding that our civilian ships stop for inspection." "Tell him we are complying," said Kyungmin, "and send the activation code to Captain Hyejin." Hyejin received the code on her personal communicator. She was sitting in what looked like the pilot seat of a grain transport ship. Around her, the bridge was decorated with pictures of farms and families. The walls were painted in soft colors that made the ship feel peaceful and safe. "All ships," she said into her communicator. "This is Harvest Moon. Begin transformation sequence." What happened next took exactly 37 seconds. The grain transport ships suddenly stopped looking like grain transport ships. The holographic projector shut down, revealing sleek hulls covered in weapons. The false walls retracted, showing engines that could push the ships faster than most military fighters. The farming equipment turned out to be missile launchers and energy cannons. Most importantly, the ships were not where the Korthans thought they were. For the past 6 hours, the cargo ships had been using stealth technology to slowly move away from their apparent positions. The Korthans had been surrounding empty space while the real ships moved into attack formation around the Korthan fleet. "Korthan vessels," said Hyejin, her voice now broadcasting on military frequencies. "You are surrounded. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." The Korthan commander was a veteran warrior named Grakthor. He had fought in 17 battles and had never been defeated. When he saw what had happened, he felt something he had not experienced in many years. He felt afraid. "How?" he said to his tactical officer. "How did they hide so many ships? Our sensors are the best in the galaxy." His tactical officer was staring at the display screens with confusion. "Sir, our sensors still say those ships are cargo vessels. According to our instruments, we are being threatened by a fleet of grain transports and medical supply ships. Meanwhile, on a research station orbiting a star in what the Council thought was empty space, Dr. Dongwu was putting the finishing touches on a project that had taken 2 years to complete. The research station was one of 47 that humans had built throughout Council territory. The Council had approved all of them because they appeared to be studying harmless things like stellar radiation and cosmic particle flows. Dr. Dongwu was indeed studying cosmic particle flows. But he was not just studying them, he was learning how to control them. "Engineer Hyejin," he said into his communicator, "are all the quantum destabilizers in position?" Hyejin was currently floating in space near a hyperspace junction point, wearing a suit that made her invisible to most sensors. She had been installing what looked like a scientific monitoring device on the navigation beacon that guided ships through hyperspace. It was not a monitoring device. "Installation complete," she said. "The device is online and waiting for your signal." Across the galaxy, 46 other human engineers were finishing similar installations. Some were disguised as repair technicians. Others were posing as scientists studying hyperspace physics. A few were pretending to be tourists who had gotten lost and needed to make emergency repairs to their ships. Each of them had installed a quantum destabilizer at a critical hyperspace junction. The devices were small and looked like ordinary navigation equipment. Even if someone examined them closely, they would appear to be standard safety devices designed to prevent hyperspace accidents. They were actually much more dangerous than weapons. "Dr. Dongwu," said Hyejin, "I'm reading massive military movement throughout Council space. It looks like they're mobilizing fleets from every member species. Dongwu checked his own sensors. The Council was indeed calling up its military forces. Hundreds of ships were moving toward human territory, preparing for what they expected to be a quick and easy war against a young species that barely understood space travel. "Let them come," he said. "In fact, let them get into hyperspace. The more ships they have traveling between stars when we activate the destabilizers, the better." The quantum destabilizers were designed to do something that no weapon had ever done before. Instead of destroying things, they would trap them. When activated, the devices would create quantum interference patterns that would make hyperspace travel impossible in large areas of the galaxy. Ships that were already in hyperspace, when the destabilizers activated, would be thrown back into normal space at random locations. Ships that tried to enter hyperspace would find that their hyperspace drives simply would not work. The great highways that connected the stars would become impassable. For a galaxy that depended on fast travel between star systems, this would be more devastating than any army. Dr. Chang Su was working on an even more ambitious project. His laboratory was hidden inside what appeared to be a medical research station, studying alien biology. The Council had approved his research because they thought he was trying to find cures for diseases that affected multiple species. He was studying alien biology, but he was not looking for cures. "Chief Engineer Min Seo," he said to his assistant, "how is the neural cascade virus coming along?" Min Seo looked up from her workstation, where she was analyzing brain scans from 17 different alien species. "We have successfully mapped the neural pathways for all major Council species. The virus is ready for deployment through their quantum communication networks." Chang Su nodded. The Council species all used some form of telepathic or empathic communication. The Valens shared thoughts through quantum-linked crystals. The Nethri existed as collective consciousnesses that could merge and separate at will. The Zephyrians could read emotions and surface thoughts from other beings. These abilities made the Council species very good at working together. They could coordinate their actions perfectly and share information instantly across vast distances. It was one of the reasons they had been able to build a galactic civilization. It was also their greatest weakness. "The beauty of the neural cascade virus," said Chang Su, "is that it does not destroy their communication abilities. It simply makes them experience what humans experience every day." "Isolation," said Min Seo. "Exactly. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they will know what it feels like to be truly alone inside their own minds. They will experience the terror of being cut off from their collective consciousnesses. They will learn what it means to face the universe as individuals, rather than as parts of a greater whole. The virus would not kill anyone. It would not cause physical pain. But for species that had never experienced individual consciousness, the psychological effects would be devastating." Back on the Soul's Pride, Admiral Kyung-min was receiving reports from human agents throughout the galaxy. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Council had taken the bait and was mobilizing for a conventional war. Their fleets were moving through hyperspace toward human territory. Their communication networks were busy coordinating the largest military operation in galactic history. They had no idea that the war had already begun, and that they were losing. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we're receiving a message from the Korthan fleet. Commander Grakthor wants to negotiate." Kyung-min considered this. The Korthans were proud warriors who rarely surrendered. The fact that Grakthor was willing to talk meant that the demonstration had been effective. "Tell him we will accept his surrender," said Kyung-min. "But remind him that this is just the beginning. What he has seen today is nothing compared to what will happen if the Council does not meet our demands." The message was sent, and within minutes the Korthan ships began powering down their weapons. Fleet Admiral Seung-ho stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. Around him, dozens of screens showed the positions of ships throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked Council fleets. Blue dots showed human vessels. Green dots indicated the locations of the quantum destabilizers that Dr. Dongwu's team had spent 2 years installing. The moment had finally arrived. "All stations report ready," said Lieutenant Commander Boram from her position at the communications console. "We have confirmation from 47 destabilizer sites. All human ships have been warned to exit hyperspace immediately. Sheng Ho looked at the main display. Hundreds of Council ships were currently traveling through hyperspace, rushing toward what they thought would be an easy victory over humanity. They had no idea that they were about to become prisoners of normal space. "Initiate Operation Severed Threads," he said. Across the galaxy, 47 quantum destabilizers activated simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the Korthan battlecruiser Hammer of Justice, Admiral Vaktar was reviewing the battle plans for the assault on the human colony of New Sol when his ship suddenly lurched violently. Alarms began screaming throughout the vessel. "What happened?" he demanded. His navigation officer was staring at her instruments in confusion. "Sir, we have been forcibly ejected from hyperspace. Our position is unknown. Our hyperspace drive is not responding to commands." Vaktar felt a cold fear creeping up his spine. "Show me our location." The main screen lit up with a star map. Their ship was floating alone in empty space, light years away from any inhabited system. According to the navigation computer, they were in a region of space that had no hyperspace routes leading in or out. "Sir," said the communications officer, "I'm receiving similar reports from ships throughout the fleet. Everyone has been ejected from hyperspace. No one can re-enter hyperspace drive." The same thing was happening to Council fleets throughout the galaxy. The Valen crystal ships found themselves stranded between stars, their quantum navigation systems showing impossible readings. The gas-form Nethri vessels were scattered across dozens of star systems, unable to reach their collective assembly points. Even the advanced Zephyrian scouts with their psychic navigation abilities could not find a way back into hyperspace. In the Council chambers, emergency sessions were being called as reports flooded in from across galactic civilization. Counselor Vexistara's crystal body was pulsing with angry red light as she tried to understand what had happened. "This is impossible," she said to the emergency assembly. "Hyperspace is a fundamental property of the universe. You cannot simply turn it off." High Counselor Rathmek was studying tactical reports from his military commanders. "Our fleets are scattered and stranded. Some ships are in systems with no habitable planets. Others are in regions with no systems at all. If they cannot reach supplies, they will run out of life support within weeks." The Zephyrian delegate's mental voice was filled with confusion and fear. "Our psychic scouts report that hyperspace routes still exist, but they have become twisted. Ships that try to enter hyperspace are ejected randomly, sometimes hundreds of light years from their intended destination." What the Council did not yet understand was that the quantum destabilizers had not destroyed hyperspace. They had turned it into a maze that only humans knew how to navigate. Dr. Dongwu had spent months studying the quantum properties of hyperspace. He had discovered that by creating specific interference patterns, he could make hyperspace routes selective. Ships with the right quantum signatures could travel normally. Ships without those signatures would be rejected or redirected. Every human ship now carried a quantum beacon that allowed it to use the modified hyperspace routes. Council ships lacking these beacons were trapped in normal space where journeys between stars took months or years instead of days. But the isolation of the Council fleets was only the first phase of humanity's plan. On the research station hidden in the Veil Nebula, Dr. Changsu was preparing to begin the second phase. His laboratory was filled with equipment that the Council's inspectors had assumed was for medical research. In reality, it was the most sophisticated neural warfare system ever built. "Chief Engineer Minseo," he said, "begin transmission of the neural cascade virus." Minseo's fingers moved over her control panel. Virus uploaded to the quantum communication network. Transmission beginning now. The virus began its journey through the quantum links that connected every major civilization in the galaxy. It moved silently through the networks that the Valens used to share thoughts. It infiltrated the collective consciousness streams that the Nethri used to coordinate their societies. It invaded the empathic channels that allowed Zephyrians to sense each other's emotions. The first victims were on Valen Prime, the crystal homeworld where billions of beings lived in perfect mental harmony. Zixara was a middle-tier administrator in the Valen bureaucracy. She had never experienced a moment of loneliness in her 800-year life. Like all Valens, she was constantly connected to the thoughts and feelings of her neighbors, her co-workers, and her family. The shared consciousness was as natural to her as breathing. When the virus reached her neural crystal, the connection simply stopped. For the first time in her life, Zixara was alone inside her own mind. She could not feel her partner's love. She could not sense her children's happiness. She could not share the warm presence of her community. There was only silence where the gentle murmur of shared thoughts had always been. She began to scream. Across Valen Prime, the same thing was happening to billions of crystal beings. The virus was not causing them physical pain, but the psychological shock was overwhelming. A species that had evolved to exist as part of a collective mind was suddenly experiencing individual consciousness for the first time. The effect was even worse among the gas-form Nethri. These beings existed as collective entities that could merge and separate at will. A single Nethri could split into dozens of smaller consciousnesses, or join with others to form massive group minds that spanned entire star systems. When the virus hit the Nethri networks, the collective entities began to fragment uncontrollably. Group minds that had existed for thousands of years suddenly broke apart into confused individual consciousnesses. Beings who had never been alone found themselves trapped in single minds, unable to merge with others, unable to share thoughts or emotions. Panic spread through Nethri space as the gas-form beings desperately tried to reconnect with their collectives. But the virus had severed the quantum links that made their group consciousness possible. The Zephyrians suffered differently, but just as severely. Their psychic abilities allowed them to sense the emotions and surface thoughts of other beings. This empathic connection was the foundation of their society, their art, and their understanding of the universe. When the virus reached the Zephyrian homeworld, the psychic network that connected every member of their species went silent. For beings who had spent their entire evolution reading the emotions of others, the sudden inability to sense anything beyond their own minds was terrifying. Kalthus was a Zephyrian poet who had spent centuries creating works of art that captured the shared emotional experiences of her people. When the psychic silence fell, she found herself unable to feel anything except her own fear and confusion. The rich tapestry of emotions that had inspired her art was gone, replaced by a void that seemed to swallow all meaning. Back on Luna, Fleet Admiral Sung Ho was monitoring the effects of the neural cascade virus. Reports were coming in from human agents throughout Council space. The major civilizations were in chaos as billions of beings experienced isolation for the first time in their evolutionary history. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Boram, "we're receiving panicked communications from Council worlds. They're reporting massive psychological breakdowns across multiple species. Their governments are losing the ability to coordinate because their leaders can no longer share thoughts directly." Sung Ho nodded grimly. "Any reports of violence or social collapse?" "Some, but not as much as we feared. Most of them seem to be too shocked and confused to organize any kind of response. They're just sitting there, trying to understand what has happened to them." The neural isolation was having exactly the effect that human psychologists had predicted. Species that had never experienced individual consciousness were not equipped to handle the sudden transition. They were not becoming violent or aggressive. They were becoming paralyzed by confusion and fear. But humanity was not finished yet. On the hidden stellar research facility in the Vale Nebula, Dr. Yun-Su was making final preparations for the most dramatic demonstration of human power. The facility looked like a harmless observatory studying cosmic radiation. In reality, it was a weapon capable of manipulating stars themselves. "General Wu Sung," she said into her communicator, "the stellar manipulator is fully charged and ready for targeting." General Wu Sung was coordinating the overall operation from his command ship in orbit around Mars. "What is our target?" "The Corthan Home System's star. The plan is to trigger a controlled solar flare that will disable their planetary shields for exactly 17 minutes. Just 17 minutes? The screaming had been going on for 6 hours. Xenobiologist Na-Un walked through the corridors of the human research station, orbiting Valen Prime, listening to the sounds of an entire civilization falling apart. Through the station's observation windows, she could see the crystal cities on the planet below, They should have been glowing with the soft light that came from billions of connected minds. Instead, they flickered chaotically as individual Valens struggled with isolation for the first time in their species' history. Dr. Na Yun, said her assistant, a young researcher named Jae-min, the psychological monitoring equipment is showing readings we've never seen before. The stress levels are off the charts. Nayan nodded sadly. She had spent 2 years studying Valen neural structures, learning how their crystal-based minds worked. She understood better than anyone what the neural cascade virus was doing to them. The Valens had evolved as a collective species. Their individual minds were not designed to function alone. How long can they survive like this? Asked Jae-min. Physically, they can survive indefinitely. The virus doesn't damage their bodies or their crystal matrices, but psychologically. She paused, watching the chaotic lights on the planet below. Imagine if you suddenly went blind and deaf and could no longer feel touch or taste or smell. That's what this feels like to them. The same chaos was spreading throughout the galaxy. On Nethri worlds, the gas-form beings were desperately trying to merge back into their collective consciousness, but the quantum links that made such merging possible had been severed. Individual Nethri, confused and terrified, drifted through their atmospheric cities without purpose or direction. The Zephyrian homeworld had gone completely silent. The empathic species, unable to sense each other's emotions, had retreated into their homes and refused to come out. Their psychic communication networks, which had carried thoughts and feelings across their entire civilization, now carried only empty static. Admiral Yu Jin watched all of this from the command center hidden beneath Luna's surface. She had been monitoring Council communications for the past week, and what she was seeing was both exactly what human strategists had predicted and more devastating than they had hoped. "Ma'am," said communications specialist Dong Hyun, "we're receiving a priority message from the Council Emergency Assembly. They're asking for a ceasefire." Yujin raised an eyebrow. "A ceasefire? We haven't fired a single shot. They're calling it a cessation of hostile activities. I think they mean they want us to stop the neural cascade virus and restore their hyperspace routes. Have they agreed to our original demands?" Dong Hyun checked his console. "No, ma'am. They're offering to negotiate in good faith and explore mutually beneficial arrangements. But they're not offering full membership in the Council or unrestricted access to hyperspace routes." Yujin shook her head. "Then we continue with the plan. They need to understand that this is not a negotiation. This is a demonstration." But General Wu Sung, who was coordinating the overall operation, knew that humanity was approaching a critical decision point. The neural cascade virus and the hyperspace disruption had achieved their purpose. The Council's military forces were scattered and helpless, and their civilian populations were in psychological chaos. Now came the most dangerous part of the plan. "Dr. Yun-Su," he said into his communicator, "are you ready for the final phase?" Dr. Yun-Su was standing before the massive stellar manipulator in the hidden facility in the Veil Nebula. The weapon had successfully demonstrated humanity's ability to trigger solar flares on distant stars. Now she was preparing to use it for something even more ambitious. "The gravitational beam is fully charged," she said. "Target confirmed, the neutron star in the Kethmoran system. The calculation shows that a precisely applied gravitational pulse will cause the star to emit a focused burst of gamma radiation toward the Council capital system. Will it be dangerous to the Council?" "Not if we calculate it correctly. The gamma burst will be intense enough to disrupt their planetary shields and communication networks, but it will last only 43 seconds. Long enough to show them what we could do, short enough that no one dies. And if we calculate it incorrectly?" Dr. Yunsu was quiet for a moment. "If we calculate it incorrectly, we could sterilize 17 worlds and kill over 1 trillion beings." This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. They could choose to end the demonstration now, while they still held the moral authority of having killed no one. Or they could take the final step and prove that they were capable of destroying entire star systems with surgical precision. "Proceed with the operation," said General Wu Sung. Meanwhile, on the Council capital world of Nexus Prime, an emergency session was in chaos. Representatives from 17 species were trying to coordinate a response to the human attacks, but their inability to communicate telepathically was making cooperation almost impossible. Counselor Vexitara was struggling to maintain her crystalline form. Without the constant support of her species' collective consciousness, her individual crystal matrix was becoming unstable. She was experiencing emotions that Valens had never evolved to handle: loneliness, despair, and a crushing sense of isolation. "Must do something," she said, her voice distorted by the instability in her crystal structure. "My people are suffering. They are losing their minds from the isolation." High Counselor Rathmek was in better condition than most, since Korthans had always been more individualistic than other council species. But even he was struggling to understand the scope of the human attack. "How did they learn so much about us?" he asked. "How did they discover our weaknesses so precisely?" The Zephyrian delegate could barely function without his empathic abilities. He sat in his chair like a statue, his large eyes staring at nothing. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was weak and confused. "They studied us. For 2 years they sent researchers to our worlds. We thought they were harmless scientists interested in our biology and culture. But they were mapping our neural structures. They were learning how to hurt us." "The question now," said Rathmek, "is what do we do? Our fleets are scattered across the galaxy, trapped in normal space. Our communication networks are compromised. Our populations are in psychological chaos. We cannot fight a war in this condition." "We must surrender," said Vexitara. "We must give them what they want before they do something even worse." But before the council could make a decision, the final demonstration began. Dr. Yunsu activated the stellar manipulator. The gravitational beam reached across thousands of light-years to strike the neutron star in the Kethmoran system. The star, which had been spinning quietly for millions of years, suddenly wobbled on its axis. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The neutron star released a focused burst of gamma radiation that traveled at light speed toward the Council capital system. The burst was perfectly aimed and precisely calculated to last exactly 43 seconds. On Nexus Prime, every sensor system in the capital suddenly detected impossible levels of radiation approaching from deep space. The planetary shields began charging to maximum power as automated defense systems prepared for what appeared to be a natural gamma ray burst that would sterilize all life in the system. But then, the impossible happened. The gamma burst struck the planet's shields and stopped. Not because the shields were strong enough to stop it, but because the radiation was designed to stop. After exactly 43 seconds, the burst ended, leaving the planet unharmed but with every electronic system overloaded and temporarily disabled. In the council chambers, emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid reset itself. The delegates sat in stunned silence as they realized what had just happened. The humans had triggered a gamma-ray burst from a neutron star thousands of light-years away. They had aimed it precisely at the council capital. They had controlled its duration down to the second, and they had demonstrated that they could have killed everyone in the system, but had chosen not to. "Impossible," whispered the Korthan military advisor. "No species has that level of technological sophistication. The energy requirements alone should be..." "Apparently," said Rathmek slowly, "we have been making assumptions about human technology that were completely wrong." A new message arrived. From the human embassy. It was short and direct. "The demonstrations are complete. You have seen what we can do. We can isolate your minds. We can trap your fleets. We can trigger solar flares on your home stars. We can create gamma-ray bursts that could sterilize your worlds. We have shown you all of this without killing a single being. Our original demands remain unchanged. Remove all restrictions on human trade and colonization. Grant us full membership in the Galactic Council. Do this within the next 72 hours, or we will stop being merciful. You have seen our capabilities. You have experienced our mercy. Do not test our patience further." Counselor Vextara looked around the chamber at her fellow delegates. The Zephyrian representative was still struggling with isolation. The Nethri delegate's containment field was flickering as its gas-form body tried unsuccessfully to merge with others of its kind. Even the proud Korthons looked shaken by the scale of human technological superiority. "We cannot fight them," she said quietly. President J1 stood before the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The building was different from the old council chamber. Instead of a massive bowl designed to make visitors feel small, the new hall was built with circular seating where every representative sat at the same level. No species looked down on any other. It had been 6 months since the council had accepted humanity's demands. 6 months since the old galactic order had ended and a new one had begun. The neural cascade virus had been deactivated. The hyperspace routes had been restored. The stellar manipulators had been powered down. But the galaxy would never be the same. "Fellow representatives," said J1, addressing the assembly in simple, clear words that were translated into dozens of languages. "Today we formally establish the Galactic Defense Corps. This new organization will ensure that no species is ever again subjected to the kind of treatment that humanity endured." Ambassador Sujin sat in the human delegation section, watching the faces of the alien representatives. Many of them still looked uncomfortable. The Valens were slowly recovering from their experience of isolation, but their crystal bodies still flickered with uncertain light. The Zephyrians had regained their empathic abilities, but they kept their psychic shields raised when humans were nearby. Even the proud Korthons seemed subdued. "The Defense Corps will operate under 3 basic principles," continued President J1. "First, no species will be denied access to trade routes or colonization rights based on their age or technology level. Second, military action may only be taken against species that pose a direct threat to others. Third, all member species have equal voting rights regardless of their size or power." Sujin remembered the long negotiations that had led to this moment. The council species had not surrendered easily, even after the demonstrations of human power. They had tried to offer partial concessions, hoping to maintain some of their old privileges, but humanity had been patient and firm. Every time the council had tried to negotiate, humans had simply reminded them of what they had seen during the 3-week demonstration period. The reminder had always been enough. Admiral Junho was conducting joint fleet exercises in the neutral zone, watching as former enemies worked alongside human ships. The Korthon heavy cruiser Strength of Honor was practicing formation flying with the human destroyer, New Busan. 6 months ago, these ships would have been shooting at each other. "Admiral," said Captain Haiyan Wu over the communication system, "the joint navigation exercise is complete. The Korthon crews have successfully learned to use the new hyperspace protocols." The hyperspace protocols were one of humanity's most important contributions to galactic peace. The old system had been controlled by the major powers, who could restrict access to hyperspace routes whenever they wanted to pressure smaller species. The new system was open to everyone, but it required cooperation between species to maintain. "Good work, Captain," said Junho. "How are the Korthon crews adapting to working with our people?" "Better than expected. It turns out that once you get past their warrior culture, they're actually quite professional. And they seem to respect us now that they know we could have destroyed them but chose not to." That was the key to everything that had happened. Humanity had demonstrated overwhelming power and then chosen mercy. Every species in the galaxy now knew that humans were capable of devastating warfare, but they had also seen that humans preferred peace when possible. Chief of Intelligence Ha Young maintained the networks that monitored galactic communications. The old council had been dissolved, but the individual species still existed, and some of them were still unhappy with the new order. Her job was to watch for signs that anyone was planning to return to the old ways. "Any concerning activity?" asked her assistant, intelligence analyst Tae-young. "The Valens are discussing the possibility of developing neural shielding technology that would protect them from future mind attacks. The Korthons are redesigning their military doctrine to account for unconventional warfare. The Zephyrians are researching ways to detect stealth technology. Should we be worried?" Ha-young shook her head. "No. They're preparing defenses against the tactics we used, which is exactly what we expected them to do. But they're not developing offensive capabilities or planning any kind of revenge. They learned their lesson." The lesson was simple. Humanity was not a species that could be bullied or threatened. They were a species that planned carefully, struck precisely, and showed mercy to defeated enemies. The galaxy was safer with humans as partners rather than as enemies. Dr. Insu was giving a lecture at the Galactic University on Nexus Prime. His subject was Collaborative Evolution in Multi-Species Civilizations. The lecture hall was packed, with students from 17 different species, all eager to learn from the scientist who had helped design humanity's peaceful revolution. The old council system failed because it was based on hierarchy and control, he explained to his audience. Species were ranked by age and technology level. Younger species were considered inferior and were denied opportunities to contribute. This created resentment and instability. A Valen student, her crystal body glowing with curiosity, raised her hand. Dr. Insu, how did humans develop such advanced technology so quickly? Our records show that your species only achieved interstellar travel 200 years ago. Insu smiled. We had advantages that other species did not have. We were used to conflict and competition. We had to develop technology quickly because we were always fighting each other. When we finally stopped fighting ourselves and started working together, we applied that same intensity to scientific research. What he did not mention was the other reason for humanity's rapid advancement. While other species had become comfortable with their place in the galactic hierarchy, humans had always known they were being watched and restricted. They had spent 2 centuries preparing for the day when they would have to fight for their freedom. The key insight, said Insu, is that diversity makes civilizations stronger, not weaker. Humans think differently than other species. We approach problems from angles that others do not consider. By including us in galactic civilization as equals rather than subjects, everyone benefits. Captain Hyun Woo piloted the first human-designed peacekeeping vessel through space that had once been controlled by the Korthan Empire. The ship was called the Unity, and it was designed specifically for the new role that humanity had taken on in the galaxy. The Unity carried no weapons that could destroy planets or trigger solar flares. Instead, it was equipped with the most advanced diplomatic facilities in the galaxy, along with defensive systems that could protect it from any conceivable attack. Its mission was to prevent conflicts before they started, and to ensure that no species was bullied by others. Captain, said his communications officer, we're receiving a distress call from the Kepler colony. They're reporting that a Nethri collective is trying to claim their system. Hyun Woo sighed. Even under the new system, there were still disputes over territory and resources. The difference was that now there was an organization dedicated to resolving these disputes peacefully. Set course for Kepler, he said. And send a message to the Nethri collective. Remind them that territorial disputes must be resolved through the assembly, not through intimidation. The message was sent, along with a subtle reminder of what had happened to the last group that had tried to use force against a smaller species. Within minutes, the Nethri collective had withdrawn their claim and agreed to submit the dispute to arbitration. As the Unity continued its patrol, Hyun Woo reflected on the changes that had swept through the galaxy. The old council had maintained order through fear and hierarchy. The new assembly maintained order through cooperation and the knowledge that humanity was watching. It was not a perfect system. There were still conflicts and disagreements. But for the first time in galactic history, every species had an equal voice in their government. No one was denied opportunities because of their age or technology level, and everyone knew that there was a species willing and able to enforce these principles. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous humans were not the ones who looked like soldiers. They were the ones who looked like friends, who spent years learning about other species, who planned carefully and struck precisely when necessary. But the galaxy had also learned that humans preferred to be actual friends rather than hidden enemies. Given the choice between war and peace, humans would choose peace every time, as long as that peace was fair to everyone. The Galactic Council had thought humans were bluffing when they issued their ultimatum. They had learned that humans never bluffed. They simply chose when to reveal their true capabilities. And once those capabilities had been revealed, the old galaxy of hierarchies and restrictions had shattered like crystal, replaced by something stronger and more just. The galaxy was at peace, and it would stay at peace as long as humanity was there to make sure that no one forgot the lessons of the 3 weeks when the stars themselves had been turned into weapons, and mercy had proven more powerful than destruction. In the end, the Council had been right about one thing: humans were dangerous. But they had been wrong about what made them dangerous. It was not their violence or their unpredictability.